Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that aims to redefine what it means to reach our full potential by exploring how movement and mindset impacts our lives and how we can all work to be the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder and coach at TEC, and on this episode, I speak with Nick Jonsson. Nick is an Ironman triathlete. He is a #1 international best-selling author. He's a speaker, and he is also an executive mental health advocate. He is the co-founder and managing director of Executives Global Network that focuses on building a caring community that provides a safe haven for executives to share their challenges, receive support, and learn from one another. His most recent book, Executive Loneliness: The 5 Pathways to Overcome Isolation, Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in the Modern Business World, was a jumping off point for our conversation. We talk about the impact of loneliness in both endurance sports as well as in the workplace, the importance of mental health in how we think about reaching our full potential, how we think about pursuing our goals, and the fact that loneliness is, one, something that we don't talk about very much, but two, is such a pervasive component of so many people's lives. We experience loneliness in endurance sports when we're training so often. The path to reaching our goals is a lonely one. We might have support from our family, our coaches, our team, but the pursuit of those goals is inherently a lonely endeavor. Reaching our goals in our career can be lonely. So we talk about what that looks like and how we can change it. It has a profound impact on our performance as athletes, our well-being as individuals, as well as our overall satisfaction when we reach those goals. If the path and route to the thing that we've said we want the most is lonely and feels isolating, then it's not going to be fulfilling when we get there. We talk about concepts like resilience and how resilience is a crucial skill for people to develop. Nick's background as a triathlon athlete has taught him the importance of having a goal-driven mindset and the ability to bounce back from setbacks. And he shares what those setbacks look like, what it looks like, or the experience he had when he wasn't able to show up for a race because he didn't take care of himself. And resilience at that time wasn't something that he was able to deploy, and his push and drive was not coming from a healthy place, both in the work environment as well as in his athletic endeavors. So many amazing opportunities here. Nick's depth and breadth of experiences and background, both in the professional setting as well as in the athletic setting, are ones that we can all pull from. And our conversation is one that really blends both of these aspects of Nick's life. We pull in the very real parallels from what it looks like to train for something like an Ironman event, and then what it looks like to stay connected to our goals and be driven and look to accomplish big things both in the professional space as well. And Nick has certainly done both of those and has combined those two passions into advocacy work and into a supportive place where high performers, high achievers can get the support that they need. So an amazing conversation with Nick, and it's one that I was grateful to be able to have the time and space to dive into. Nick brings so much to our conversation in his expertise, his vulnerability, his ability to be genuine and honest with his experiences, as well as the people that he's worked with. So as always, you can find more information on everything that we talk about at thomasendurancecoaching.com. If you need support in in the endurance sports space. If you're looking for someone to have your back and to be in your corner, we are always grateful to provide that support to athletes around the world. You can come to thomasendurancecoaching.com, click the button in the top right corner, and we will be more than happy to set up a free consultation with you to understand how we can support you. And enduranceminded.com. Let us know what you think. Scroll to the bottom of the page, leave us a comment, let us know what you thought about this episode, your wins, your losses, your struggles, your successes we want to share in your journey. Thank you so much to our amazing community and all of our listeners. It's something that brings me a tremendous amount of joy, and I can't thank all of you enough. We'd love to hear from you at enduranceminded.com. And last but not least, rate, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. If you've yet to do so, if you already have, find another friend. Who else could benefit from this? So much of our community is based on those of you that are involved and are our avid listeners. So thanks for all of your support, and please continue to share. And if you've yet to do so, rate and subscribe so you can be alerted when we release a new episode every other Tuesday at noon. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Nick Jonsson. Hello, Nick. Welcome to Endurance Minded.
Thank you so much, Taylor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you. Any number of opportunities to start and places to kick this conversation off, and I'm certainly excited to see where it goes. But I think a good place to start would be maybe just give us an overview of your personal journey. There's a lot. When I read your story and started to read your book, there's a lot of areas I connected with, and I think that there's so much kind of your personal experience that resonates with any number of people in any number of different positions. And so I'd love for you just to bring us up to speed to kind of what got you to where you're at now, and give us that recap of your personal journey.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure to do so. So I was born in Sweden, then I was educated in Australia, and then I lived and worked the last 20 years or so in Southeast Asia. So mainly in Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore. That's where I'm running a business these days as well. Before I started my own business, though, I was in the corporate world, working my way up, starting as an account executive in an American advertising company in Bangkok, and then eventually becoming, the general manager, then managing director, running big teams and so in Southeast Asia. And while that was what I wanted to do, that was my goal, that was my target. Once I achieved it, I was sitting at the top and I was quite lonely. And that's when I decided to sort of look at, can I live my life in a different way? And that meant twofold. One was then to go on my own and doing more entrepreneurial journey. But secondly, and we'll talk about this, letting go of some of my bad habits, including junk food and too much alcohol, and instead really living a life where I'm much more in the wilderness, more sport, and also really, really looking after my diet these days.
Yeah. So I know part of your process, or part of your journey rather, was to train for your first Ironman. It was Ironman Sweden. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm curious, what about that process? What about committing to training for an Ironman was important to you, and what did you get out of that while you were trying to navigate all of these dynamic circumstances and personal things and job? And I know there was a lot going on in the mix there when you committed to that. So yeah, walk me through that. I'm just curious what place that held for you in that time in your life.
Yeah, and we then go back 10 years in time. So at that time, I'm still in a corporate job. I'm still married to who is now my ex-wife. And I started to get into endurance sport. I'd done some shorter triathlons. I'd done a marathon, but then I signed up for the full distance Ironman. And as most of the listeners may know, it means training 20-25 hours a week. So it's quite a major commitment. If you have your family, you're a managing director of a big company, plus the training, it's quite hard to balance it. And if you add on that you're trying to also perhaps eat junk food and you're also going to the bar, enjoying yourself, trying to have a good time, then eventually something has to go. And that's what happened in my life. I then burnt out and I resigned from my job, and I then also filed for divorce. I was in a very bad space around that time. I managed to complete the first race, but it was painful. It was really painful. In 2015, then I signed up for another Ironman race, but I didn't even make it to the starting line. I was then in a full-blown personal crisis.
What kept you from the starting line? Just the challenging situations in your life, or what was that?
Yeah, to keep up with the training, you need to have some peace of mind, and things need to be pretty much in order. It's just too hard. And at that stage, then was going through a divorce. I didn't have that peace of mind. I didn't sleep well, so that meant that I canceled too many training sessions, and the pressure was accumulating to the point where this is not going to be a good experience. And then I'm sort of the kind of guy that either I do it or I don't. So I pulled the plug. What I didn't realize, though, that pulling the plug on that, I really lost myself. I didn't have any goals. So I lost my all my health interest. And in 2016 and 17, my life was even worse. I lost fitness. I gained a lot of weight. And in the end, I could hardly run or hardly go for a short jog.
Do you feel like that's an important? Let me back up, I guess, with maybe a more targeted question that comes to mind is when you're operating at a high level like you are and have been. Is it important, do you think, to have those personal goals? Is that an important cornerstone to have something like? And of course, it doesn't have to be an Ironman, but to have that thing that keeps your attention and keeps you focused kind of on your, whether it's personal health or just making that time for yourself, because it's so easy to get lost in everybody else's stuff. You have a high pressure job and family and all the things that so many people are navigating. I don't know, what does that play a role in kind of how you think about setting those goals, or where you were at that time? What's that felt like for you?
Yeah, it definitely felt like I needed to do something for myself. And the way I look at the sports and in triathlon, it's swimming, cycling, and running. You get a couple of things. First, you're getting out in nature. You're coming out of the city or out of the office. You're forced to go in the nature, and that has benefits. Secondly, you can divide up the training, and I do that. Even today, I do that. Partly, you go on your own. So that's sort of your meditation space. That's when you get time with yourself and you empty yourself, and you really can go deep inside yourself. And then there's the social side as well. So in my case, then you have the swim academies, the running clubs, and the cycling clubs. And that is then replacing perhaps the time in the bar and changing from some bad habits, which I had in my case, and into good habits and better relationships, where it's about doing something meaningful together. So in that sense, it has a huge impact on me. But in order to show up for all these sessions, many times, especially in Southeast Asia, where you have a lot of traffic and so on, it's getting up there in the middle of the night at 4 a.m., even before the fishermen come out. You're out there and get out and do your training before the traffic hits the road. And it is tough. And if you don't have a goal, like a marathon or a cycle race or something to look forward to, or some camaraderie with some of your friends and clubs and commitments, then it's pretty easy to say, nah, that's too hard work. I'm not going to do that. And that's what the majority do. They love to do this, but not many are able to pull it off.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, the camaraderie piece. I mean, that's such a, it's so easy to be, to do all these things solo, forget about that the value and power of connecting through these different endeavors. I know that's something you've talked a lot about and wrote about, is the loneliness in sport and leadership. What role does loneliness play, or what's the value for you of that connection piece to try to move us away from that inherent loneliness, component of Ironman or leadership?
Yeah, so I think isolation was something that didn't realize I was suffering from. I just thought that the feelings I had around work and the pressures I thought they came with the job. So when I left the office, I could feel a lot of pressure many times, and either I went to the bar and have some drinks with my friend and let the pressure go and had some good time, or I went for a workout and forgot about it. But the issue was that when I came back to the office, the issues were still there. I didn't really know how to speak. I didn't yet know how to be vulnerable and with whom. I didn't, for example, have a proper setup with mentor, sponsor, or coaches who I was open and honest and vulnerable with. That was the issue. And therefore, when I came into the bar scene, for example, I have a good time with my friends. We were laughing, looking at some sport, having a great time. But I didn't share what was on my mind. I didn't share what was really going through my mind and the challenges I was facing. So I wasn't ready to be honest. I was not vulnerable. And that was the issues. And that is why I was going through some really, really difficult times then during a few years, because I kept trying to find the solutions myself rather than utilizing the amazing network I had. And the camaraderie was right there. I was part of the running clubs and so on, but I didn't share anything about what was going on in my life. I didn't ask my network for help.
It's so easy to be lonely when we're surrounded by people. I know maybe even more so, or more so in a leadership position, is that we have all these people around us, right? You have a team, and you have and then we come home, and oftentimes there's family there, and seemingly there's infinite numbers of opportunities or places where we could be supported, but we still feel lonely. Is that it? And you just touched on it, but maybe we could just expand on that, because I'm interested in your experience there. Is it just is it fear? Is it a lack of knowing how to be vulnerable? I mean, what keeps us lonely when we're literally surrounded by people all the time? What's been your experience there, and then maybe even what you've seen with other folks in similar situations?
Yeah, I think it all starts also within. If we are not well physically and mentally and emotionally by ourselves, then we are very scared to be vulnerable around other people. And if we have lost a connection in ourselves, then we lose naturally the connection to other people. And I could be in a room full of family or colleagues or friends at that time, and it didn't feel right. I had some to go to the point where if I medicated myself with some alcohol, for example, then that pressure went, and I was more at ease getting along with people. And of course, that then leads to that you drink more, because you're letting the steam go and the pressure leaves you, and therefore, in my case, this bad habit turned to an addiction during this stage, and that is the issue. And it might not only be alcohol. We have so many things around us today. It can be drugs, gambling, can be social media, sex, and all kind of form of addictions that creeps in then if we don't find that kind of connection. And that is the real issue. And so indeed, it's a tough space to being in a room full of people where you're supposed to feel warmly connected, but you don't.
And I imagine too, there's a piece of that specifically from the executive and leadership space, where it's set up to be top down, right? Where you're supposed to have, or the expectation often is that you have all the answers, and you are the most put together person in the room, and you have all the all the tools you need to process. And so no one ever asks you how you're doing, or because they just assume you have it you have it all together. Has that been your experience, that there's this construct too, that we don't often give those people in leadership roles the space to be vulnerable, because we've just imagined that to get there they had to have all of the their life together? I'll use quotes. Is that accurate? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only my experience, but also as I was interviewing executives for my book and surveys and so on. Indeed, the findings were that 33% of the executives I surveyed for the book had feelings of loneliness and isolation in their roles, and that is the issue right there. And then the fact is that not only do they feel isolated, but they also do not talk about it. They don't do anything for it, for the reason that you just mentioned. People would assume that they have it all together when they clearly don't. And many of these senior executives are also uh, high achievers, and anxious overachievers perhaps is a term that also I'm using a lot, that people might be driving themselves to work so hard to get higher and get more, to prove to themselves that they can do the job. And what happens then is they end up in positions perhaps that they're not capable of handling. And that certainly was how I felt at that time. I felt I couldn't deliver on what I should.
Hmm. Fear of failure seems to be something that, one, holds a lot of people back, but two, I know you talk about this in your book, there's also a stigma around failure, that that it is actually failure and not just part of the process. And truthfully, I mean, that's, we don't learn anything from our successes, right? We should really celebrate those failures, but that's not the case, right? It's not the case in athletics, right? We tend to get very bogged down in our failures, whether it's just a training session doesn't go well, a race doesn't go well. And maybe you can speak to that, like if that played a role when you didn't make it to the start line for your Ironman. But yeah, maybe just curious, kind of that role of failure for you, and then even how do we leverage it, or what's the opportunity there to change the narrative to make that actually something that doesn't bog us down and get us into those lonely places.
Yeah, the fear of failure is huge, and I think indeed we live in a society that still, looks at the winners, and you can only look at sport. If there's the Olympics or a football game, or no matter what it is, it's only the winner that really gets the glory and the trophy, and perhaps number two is the first loser. And it's the same in the workplace. It's one person that get a promotion, and many times one person that is glorified. I know that we are trying to change this, but stereotypically, this is still the way it looks like, and people are scared of being number two and do anything to reach that position, to be in there. That was certainly my case all the way from university. Once I got a taste for getting some certificate or award for topping the class or getting a scholarship, I wanted more of that. It became addicted to me as well, and I was chasing it and so on. And there's many of those types in these senior roles out there, and therefore it becomes almost like a bloodbath with everyone trying to get higher and get more and more. And when you have that mindset, you're stepping perhaps on other people's toes, and you have to elbow your way up rather than building a supportive working culture. So I completely agree, Taylor, that we have this issue.
Is there an opportunity to reframe that failure component so it actually opens up a chance to be vulnerable? I mean, is there? Am I go back to, and even in my own journey, just as someone who admittedly would identify, as a high achiever and someone who has oftentimes maybe goals that are too lofty. Yeah, you just can't stand the thought of failing, and then you look around you and you really can't stand the idea of telling the people around you that you failed, or having them recognize that, and then that pulls you more inward, right? Then you start to just grapple with your own stuff. You're like, well, I'll handle it. I need to figure it out on my own, because I can't surely tell these people around me, whether it's family or coworkers or team or whatever. I mean, what's the shift there to make failure less problematic? Or what's that looked like for you, or maybe even just what you see as the opportunity there as we shift that narrative?
Well, I think we can look at it in two sides here. One, perhaps the corporate side, and one for the athlete. So if we look at the corporate side first, then now when I'm running sort of more of an entrepreneurial business, I have been able to create a culture for myself, and I didn't want to have the kind of corporate culture I was in before. I wanted to have a more open and warmer culture, and I have created that with the company. We have a fail fast policy where people are not scared of failing. Instead, they even have parts of the budgets which we call experimental or experiment budget, like 20% of the budgets, this is for testing and trying, and you can, whatever happens with that, it should be a learning, and you should share instead with the team, what did we learn from this. So if we use, for example, in marketing, if we test a supplier for a month or 2 months, then it's an experiment, and there's no expectations that this has to go right. We have to get everything right. The most important is, what can we learn from this? Is it something that, if we don't continue with this supplier, what did we learn from this? What can we implement and do ourselves in the company? So if we have this mindset of learning from everything instead of calling it a failure, then things are working better. And I also created a culture where everyone is welcome to book meetings with me one-on-one. And the good thing is now, with, of course, it's easy to do this online, easy to have one-on-one conversations, and I'm trying to be there for the team and not judge them, not blame them. Instead, try to see what we learn from it and how we can do it differently. So that's the corporate world. When it comes to the sports world, these are also conversations that I have with the athletes, and I spend most of my time these days in Thailand, Phuket, in an Ironman training camp, should I say. It's a camp of Jürgen Sack. He was 8 times in the top 10 world champion in Kona. He's my coach, and he's also running this academy. So there's a lot of world champions around there. There's pro athletes and so on. And yet it's very competitive. But even there in the camp, we have this open culture of trying to talk to each other and see what we can learn from it. And really, instead of blaming, it is sharing what we can learn from it. And even in the training sessions, there's constantly some elements of surprise involved, because that's when you're competing. Anything can happen on the day, so you got to be ready to tackle any challenge.
If you're like me, you know how important it is to fuel your activities and ensure you're recovering properly in between workouts. That's where the Amino Company comes in. With their products, Heal and Perform, I'm able to access sustained energy and increase power output during my workouts, as well as recover faster and more efficiently. I use Heal for recovery. It's a 100% science-backed formula that was originally developed for astronauts to maintain muscle mass in space. Taking Heal after my training has allowed me to increase my recovery and decrease soreness, making my body feel stronger and healthier overall. This patented science-backed amino acid blend is designed to replenish your sore muscles after tough workouts. Heal's great for post-workout nutrition and is scientifically more than 3 times more efficient at triggering muscle growth and repair than any other protein source. Perform is my go-to for before and during training sessions. Perform has been scientifically proven to improve muscle performance, reduce fatigue and recovery times, and increase the benefits from your workouts. Perform is formulated to minimize muscle breakdown during exercise and maximize muscle growth after exercise. Since taking Perform, I've seen increases in my maximal strength in the gym, as well as feel the benefits during endurance training. It provides sustained and lasting energy throughout my day without any crash or harmful side effects. I've been using Perform and Heal from the Amino Company daily, and I've seen huge improvements in both my performance and recovery. As a business owner and athlete, I'm beyond excited to have found something that helps me get the most out of my training and recovery so that I can maximize my precious training time. So right now, when you visit aminoco.com/EM30 and use the discount code EM30 at checkout, you get 30% off. So if you're looking to take your recovery to the next level and try science-backed products designed to boost your performance by up to 3 times, then visit aminoco.com/EM30 and use the discount code EM30, that's EM30 at checkout, to get 30% off plus a free gift with purchase. That's aminoco.com/EM30. Use offer code EM30 at checkout.
One of the things that comes to mind, we're talking about training camps and creating workplace culture and all these opportunities for growth and resiliency is something I know that you've talked about, and maybe I just see an opportunity to speak to that, or that's kind of one of the first things that comes to mind. I'm thinking about doing all these things that are really challenging, right? Creating a workplace culture where people feel safe to fail is not easy. That is not something that comes naturally. Even when we say like, it's okay to fail, people don't like to fail, right? So then we have to then create a space where there is this, resiliency component, or they know that they can come back. And of course, in sport, we have to keep coming back, right? Every day is our best day, and it's the cumulative effort of what we put in over long periods of time. So yeah, what role does resiliency play for you? And like what is it, and how do we develop it? Because it gets tossed around a lot, but I feel like you've put a very fine point on it. So what's that? What is it, and how do we get to it?
Well, I think it comes back to first with vulnerability and creating that trust there. And I say it has to start with the leader. It has to start with the top, from the top. And let me give you an example here. In my book, I'm quite vulnerable. I'm sharing the moment when I hit my rock bottom, when I was at the lowest point of my life in 2018, and I wrote my will and my testament, and I couldn't see my way out of this. This is inside my book, and when I have a job interview for someone who want to join my company, I send them a copy of the ebook, and if they don't have time to read all of it, I don't expect that. I at least pinpoint them to this page where they can read about that. So when they're coming into a job interview, they've already seen the darkest moment of my life there, so they should feel pretty safe to be a bit more honest and vulnerable with me in the interview and be themselves rather than putting on a show. I had a job interview a few years ago with one candidate who shared that he had 2 suicide attempts behind him, and he shared a scar on his body from this. That was one of the first things he said in this job interview. I hired him. He's still working with me today. So you can imagine what kind of open relationship we have moving forward from that experience. And how do I link this back to resilience? Well, if you set the scene by having this trust built there, we will go through anything together when we work together. We will look at things, if we start by that, then nothing will be as challenging as the first conversation we had. And that's what I mean with leading by vulnerability and being human, and show that, we all go through up and downs in this roller coaster of life, but this has to come from the leader, because then also I'm demonstrating time and time again when I'm going through difficult training sessions, and I've been training here in Sweden recently, and it's been really cold. I've been cycling in some heavy storms in almost freezing degrees, and I take these videos and I share with people, and I don't change my training schedule. The last 3 months, if it's locked in, I go as long as I can see the road, and if the lightning and thunder is not so bad that they blow me off the road, then I will be out there tackling every condition, because you learn something from that experience as well.
That's a lesson in resiliency for sure, right? It's so easy now to cancel the session, or to move it indoors, or to go to indoor training environment or something. So good on you. That's impressive. I guess to that end, there's a real need, I would say, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, but when you push through those challenging times, or let's even back up, you're kind of staring down what is going to really push you, right? This could be in sport and life, building a business, and so there's a resiliency component there, but there also has to be some deeper undercurrent, right? It's this kind of your why, or finding your purpose. What what's the role of that been for you, maybe in either one or both of those genres in terms of sport and business, and what keeps you coming back? Because it's, even when we have these vulnerability, some of these amazing tools, still hard, it still is uncomfortable. It's still all of these things. So yeah, what's finding your purpose, or we call it your why? What's that for you?
Yeah, if we first look back on sports then, so as I mentioned, I've been in Sweden the last couple of months to training. I have a full distance Ironman event race next week actually, and I don't have an indoor trainer here with me. I have my coaches giving me the training plan, and I'm also working full time, so I have that schedule for training, and there's no alternative because it's enough hours in the training plan. I just cannot push it to the next day, so training has to be done no matter what, and I have the obligation to my coach to complete it, and I also set a goal on the time I want to achieve, so it just doesn't cross my mind that I can cancel it. It's not an option. So I think that's linked back to the resilient piece and just pushing on and having to show up being your best. And I know also that you've been talking about that, and you've been a coach yourself, and that's why as an athlete it's very, very hard to not have someone who you are accountable to. Yes, there's apps there you can sign up with, but that's not the same as having someone, even if they just make your schedule once a week and send you, and someone who you at least can consult with, who's there on the sideline and holding you accountable. That's how I came back. When I was at my lowest point, I got a life coach, not an Ironman coach per se, but someone who could just get me back some small targets, some goals, getting back wearable devices. And we set a small fitness target. And I also then scaled myself every day, looking at the calories and just to get back. And so it works at any level. It doesn't have to be at the top endurance level. It can be just getting off the sofa and trying to get back on track again.
Yeah, that's great. Your race. What race is next weekend? Is it Sweden?
Yeah, it's the full distance Ironman Sweden next week.
Yeah. What's your goal time? You mind sharing?
Oh, you'll be the first one I share with. I'm targeting sub 10 hours, which would be fantastic for me. I'm soon 50 years of age, so that'd be great.
That's incredible. Oh, good for you. I love that. That's great. Well, it sounds like you're doing all the work. So and you've put up with all the conditions, so you won't be surprised if anything, cold conditions, rainy, cold water, whatever that is. That's great. All right, we'll check back in with an update to see if you, but everybody can follow your journey. So let's go. So we got, 2018 was your rock bottom, like you shared. And then you started to, I guess I'm curious there, there was obviously just a massive transition there where, you identified this loneliness, and this ultimately led you to where you're at today in large part. And, but what was that identification process like? Because I talk to a lot of people that it's, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? Like we can see it, right? Like as a coach and as someone who's maybe in a mentorship position or whatever, you can see that this person needs support, but they can't see it. And they're, they have to be the one to initiate. So maybe I'm curious what that next from, here I am at rock bottom to let me change my life and identify what I need. What were some of those steps, and what did that part of the journey look like to actually get you to the other side of, what you saw as your full potential and possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk you through that. And that's really the summary of my book, where I lay out the 5 steps there. And we can perhaps just talk briefly through those 5 steps. And we will come to the 5th step, which is going to answer your question before about the purpose as well. So the first step here, when I was at my rock bottom, I luckily I shared with my new wife, was getting remarried here. I shared with her how I felt, and as they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. She immediately dragged me to a doctor, and she told the doctor my story as well. So suddenly, immediately there was two people knowing, and I was basically exposed. And from there on, there was no way back. And the next day, we spoke with someone else who had gone through similar challenges before, and she then linked me to a recovery group. And I was sitting in a 12-step recovery program, listening. And suddenly, I was sitting in that circle, listening to other people who'd gone through similar challenges before. Other business people who said, "Yeah, I had this going through 5 years ago, 10 years ago." And then all the stigma was lifted from me. I felt, oh, I'm not alone in this. It's been other people who've gone through similar challenges. And that gave me a lot of hope. And that was then the first step. And I was asked then to take a stock, basically, either by pen and paper or a spreadsheet, where I wrote down all the issues I had and the pains that was inside me. And on that list had to be that I was overweight, my diet, too much alcohol. I had some broken relationships, damaged relationship. I had to really write this inventory list. And just like you would do if you're a store owner or a shopkeeper, you would do an audit. But how often do we as human beings, as sports people or business people, taking this proper look at ourselves? And as you said, you can't see the forest for the trees, and that's what we're talking about here. That was what I had to do, and that is the step one that I have included in my book. So taking stock.
Beautiful. What I'm curious, would you mind sharing some of those next steps? And obviously we'll direct folks to the book, but I feel like there's an opportunity here to just just to kind of further highlight your journey. What does 2 through 5 look like? And even if you don't want to share them specifically, maybe just at a macro level, what it looks like to bring you kind of out of that place into a much more positive place where you can have that clarity and not be so lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk through them. So the second step then was asking for help. So once you made that list with all those issues, it was looking at every line. And I did this with my sponsor. You can do it with a coach or a mentor, where you look line by line. Okay, I have this issue. Who can you take this to? Who can you ask for help? And there will be coaches, mentors. There will also be charity organizations and so on who can help you. There might be a book you can pick up, an audio book, to sort these issues out. So that was the second step, really looking at every line. And again, as you said, people might not see it themselves, so they need some guidance or help here. And together then with your coach, you can sit down and look at them, just creating this list here of who you can ask for help. And that's what I did. And that is when things started to really take off for me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that feels often like the hardest part, right? The asking for help. I mean, that feels like where most people get hung up. Even if you've identified that you're feeling lonely, you're not, maybe you're spiraling, all these things are happening. That's where people stop, right? From what I can, see out in the world. What's your advice or guidance in how to get people, one, to a place where they feel like they can ask for help, but then maybe it's even identifying who that person is. I don't know if that is an issue or a stumbling block for people, but we look out in the world and we go, well, who do I ask? Where is that person at? Are they someone I already know? Do I need to find someone else? I don't know. What's that? How do we get them to that very important number 2 step?
Yeah, and that actually links nicely into this third step then, because then it was about getting healthy. So I was looking at that list of all the things I needed help with. The things you tackle first is everything related to your physical and mental and emotional health, really to get yourself in shape again. So that's, looking after your diet and your sleep and tracking, getting some daily exercise going, because it's very hard to do anything else before you get some self-confidence in yourself. And this is what's going to happen here. You're getting off that sofa, you start eating healthier, you sleep better, you have some small wins, and there's nothing better than losing some weight or so on. Then you're getting that confidence to be ready for what then is the fourth step, is nurturing healthy relationships, where the people that you have harmed or the people that you have issues with, and most people have some relationship issues with an ex-wife or colleagues or a neighbor. There's been things that's been said that wasn't perhaps nice. So in the fourth step then is working with a coach or a sponsor here to really go back and make amends and apologize and set things right so that you can move forward without any pain.
The self-confidence piece is an interesting point. It's something that I've talked a lot about, and I believe strongly in, is that from a health and wellness perspective, just from, I think that there's so much power in that commitment to ourselves before we commit to something else, and that you have to, like you said, I mean, you have to feel good in your own body, or certainly it's going to make things much more fruitful if you feel healthy and strong and happy and confident before you then go try to do something else that is challenging. So what's, and even in the work that you're doing currently with leaders and executives, what's your just kind of, I guess, take or opinion on that commitment to ourselves so that we can do other challenging things?
Yeah, it's all about self-leadership, right? We have to lead ourselves before we can lead others. And that's why it starts within and feeling good and so on before we can tackle that. And I was just speaking with one speaker who is talking on the topic of self-leadership, and he reflected on some of the photos of him at the last conference when he was speaking. And he didn't like the photos because his belly was a bit big. He said, who am I to stand there and talk on this topic when, I'm not fit myself? People will judge me. And that's exactly what it is. You have to have your own house in order before you can ask someone else to do it. And we know this with children. It doesn't matter what you tell the child, they copy you anyway. So this is what it's about here. Yeah, so sort yourself out, and then everything else will be much easier.
Yeah. I'm curious to get maybe just your take on a kind of a sentiment that I've talked about a lot, and it's in the same vein, which is it's not selfish to be selfish, meaning that, we have to prioritize. That's, if we back up one step, what often gets in people's way is that they say they don't have time, right? Specifically, and this ties into people in executive, leadership roles, is very busy schedules, right? We have lots of other people and other things that we're responsible for. And so what that often manifests itself as is, well, then I have to do all these things. And at the end of the day, there's no time left for me. And I make the argument daily that it actually should be in reverse, right? You build in your time first. And that might be challenging. There's like you were saying with your Ironman training, like there's limited time in the day, but it is a cornerstone of your day so that you can go and do these other things that you're responsible for. So yeah, I'm just curious, on your kind of experience with that, and as someone who is a high achiever and has a lot on their plate and is running lots of different organizations and doing lots of different things. What does that need to look like for you? And, what's your opinion, I guess, on, or your position on putting yourself first so that you can show up for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do as well. And after my race in Sweden, I will go to Phuket and I will stay in the training camp to train. And I work from there remotely as well. And I have already put in my training schedule because I know the schedule of the sessions they have from until the end of this year. And that means they go way in before my business meeting. So it's there before, it's protected, and everything else will fall in after that. So it's exactly as you say. And then also another thing, and the fifth step then of my book, which ties in nicely here, was about finding your purpose. And my purpose then, as I come out of my crash myself, is really to do what I do today. And thank you, Taylor, for having me on the show, sharing this, is to help others to go through this, because I know there's probably listeners today who will resonate and feeling a bit lonely and feeling isolated, and everyone needs some guidance, some tip how to break through that so it doesn't go south or go as bad as me. You shouldn't have to hit rock bottom and lose everything in your life and rebuild it. There should be an easier way, and that's my purpose these days now, to be of service to others. And I should say, after I put in my training schedule and my time for myself, I also put in time for giving back. I put in time for helping out at rehabs, charities, and doing these kind of things to spread a message. And only after that, thirdly, come the time for my business and so on.
Yeah, that's great. What do you think keeps people from doing that? Because I agree, and that's my approach. I have to take care of myself first, and then what is it that stops people from taking tactically the approach that you just outlined?
The issue of the corporate world, where many people, especially senior executives and so on, perhaps working across different time zones, and the pressures and so on, that they just don't have the luxury of doing that. If we are entrepreneurs and building our own business and our culture, we can do that. I have 40 employees in my company now. We haven't had an office for 8 years. People are working remotely. They are responsible and have daily targets, weekly targets, monthly targets, and we have a reporting system. And people don't have to tell me if they need 2-3 hours off to do something. We look at the big picture, and I encourage people to live their life first, and as long as the job gets done after. There's something wrong with the big corporations who haven't been able to transform in this way yet, but hopefully they can learn from you and me, Taylor.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I'm gonna we'll stay on this topic because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and honestly just massively interested in giving people tactical solutions to how to create that space and time. I mean, I don't know about for you, but I spend a tremendous amount of time talking to people about where is the time, and you make a great point, and it's very real. Is that I understand that I have the luxury of creating that space because I'm in complete control and I have complete autonomy of how I move through my day. Now, the day might be very busy, but ultimately it is my decision with how to fill it and where I put my time because I run my own businesses. I understand that there are people that don't have that luxury and that there are real demands and time periods that they have to be available. And like you said, that gets stretched into the very early morning into the late hours. I work with a lot of people actually in Singapore and in Asia, and that is the case. There's the window for sleep is small because of the expectation to be on a call at 1 a.m. for another time zone, and this, that, and the other. So given all of that and those very real constructs, when you're working and talking to these people, how do they create that time? I mean, how do we get into a situation or a scenario where they do have some level of autonomy over their ability to get their own house in order first, so that they don't feel all of these things, the stress and the anxiousness and all these things anymore, or at least less of that?
Well, I think it comes down to planning and discipline. And for example, I don't have a TV. There's just no way that I would have time to watch TV. If I want to see something, I go to the cinema a few times a year, and I make a point of making that with my wife and my son, or with a family member or a friend, and then we have a good time around that, and it's a special occasion. So I don't subscribe to any of the social media news updates. I don't read the news. I don't follow the media. I just don't have the time for those things. So if you prioritize your life to remove all those things, and instead you schedule specifically the things And I also like to commit to other people. As I mentioned, I belong to the swim academy, running clubs. I have my triathlon group when I'm there. Wherever I go in the world, I plan in advance and I look up the clubs. I write to them. As soon as I will book a flight ticket somewhere, I look up and I will ask for the training schedule. I will stick it in my calendar before the things are there. Then I just stick to it. I've done that for years and years, and it would be very, very rare if something is moved. If something happens that I'm sick, then maybe I go for a walk those 2 hours if I cannot do the cycle ride or something like that. But those are the slots, and I respect them and I honor them. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to plan for it. We need to be disciplined, and we need to be committed. I think no matter how much you work, that you still have 1 or 2 hours a day for exercise, especially now when you can have a headset and you can listen to an audio book, or you can download something and listen to something related to that topic, and also will be more effective. We need some space, and I touched on this before. I see my running, cycling, and swimming also as my meditation. It's when I'm saying when I go out for a long bike ride, that's when I'm working. That's when I'm most creative. That's when I work the most. And I will think of things, and it's not uncommon that I stop my bike ride 2-3 times and I take some notes in my phone notes. And that's where the biggest ideas, the breakthroughs are coming, because I get that space in my brain. So I believe I'm most productive then. So I have no bad feelings about going out for a bike ride, because that's when the creativity kicks in.
Yeah, the space piece, I think, is something that resonates with me. I see it as, you actually get time back, right? When you make that time for yourself, it actually scales your time in other areas of your life, because there's clarity and you're rested and you feel connected and you feel your body. There's so much that goes into that. And it's actually, while it might take you, if it's an hour or 2 hours or 3 or whatever, I think you're going to get that back tenfold in your ability to, whether it's just from a creativity perspective or just that you don't feel so tired and you're not drained, and you're actually bringing an energetic, version of yourself to whatever you're doing, whether it's family or coworkers or whatever. It makes me think about something else that I really like to talk about, which is that there's this kind of that we want to weight the time for ourselves equally with the time on the rest of our schedules, right? And so what I mean by that is, I'm a big proponent, like you, of it's scheduled in. You block that time out, and when that calendar alarm goes off on my computer, I treat that like a meeting with anyone else, right? It's a meeting with myself, and I wouldn't miss a meeting with you, and I wouldn't miss a meeting with myself, right? So the weight is equal there, but that's not often the case, right? Even with people that have it booked in, they're like, well, I'll just keep working a little bit longer. I'll take this other meeting, and it gets pushed further down the list. What does that resonate with you? That just kind of equal weight? I know we're talking about it, but again, just from like a tactical perspective, I'm curious what your experience has been, whether yourself or with executives, to just get that mindset of this is as important as anything else in my life. How do people get to that place? Because that's a big bridge to build. Often is to see that weight equally.
Well, again, it comes into discipline here to schedule it and stick to it, but it also comes into trusting your colleagues and your peers. And we're talking about either business owners, entrepreneurs, or senior executives. And it's about trusting that the team can do it, and empowering them and delegate the tasks to them so that you can take that space. And it's about working on your business instead of working inside your business. So by sticking to your plans, also you're actually helping yourself to grow your business and moving forward. If you're not able to do that, then you certainly need to get a coach to help you to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe we take too much ownership almost over that space, and we need that support group. We need that external support so that we feel like we can delegate and create that space and time. That's a good way to think about it. So shifting gears a little bit, I want to move up to I could talk about creating space for exercise all day long because it's something that I believe deeply in. But let's move up to or fast forward to your current. I want to talk a little bit about the group that you're managing director for in Singapore, the executive support group. I think that's just it's a massively impactful space, and I think that's such an amazing organization. But yeah, just tell us about that and what led you to be involved in that, because I think it's going to bring it brings it full circle in a large way.
Yeah, sure. So it's a confidential peer network, and some call it masterminds. There's many of these groups out there. Also in the US, you have the YPOs and the Vistage and the conference board and so on. And you have different kind of networks, if it's for executives or business owners and so on. And our network, EGN, then Executives Global Networks, is specifically for senior executives, so VPs, CEOs, managing directors of larger companies, where they could feel, the lonely at the top, as they say. So what we do then is that we match them with peers at their seniority level, similar responsibilities that are not competitors. Everyone then sign a non-disclosure agreement, so they should feel that this is their trusted space. They then meet 6 times a year for 4 hours, and this is scheduled a year in advance. So it's almost like having your own management team, like an external management team or your private advisory board, where you can check in with them and be vulnerable and be honest and open with your challenges. If you have, for example, an upcoming presentation to your board, or your boss have given you some huge challenge and you're not sure whom to talk to, you can certainly go to your coach and talk about it, but your coach will be able to ask you some powerful questions. But in this group, then you have like-minded with similar responsibilities who might have done that before. So hopefully they can help you so you don't do the same mistakes as they've done. And it's when we do this, when we're helping each other in this safe format, we call it a safe space, then you're also building incredibly deep connections, real relationships, where you practice to be vulnerable, you practice to be open, because you realize the more honest and open I am with my challenges, the better support I get, and vice versa. So that's what we do, and that's why I'm very, very passionate about this business, and it links very nicely and also to the way I want to live my life.
What's been I'm sure that there are many, but what's been the, I guess, kind of main outcome that you've seen as a result of providing this type of space for executives, for people at the top? What's been that, maybe even it's the thing that you're most proud of, or the biggest outcome?
Well, it ties in very nicely to our conversation as well, because let me mention what is the number one most discussed topic in these meetings. And I've been joining hundreds of these meetings, and I know what they're talking about. The most difficult part for anyone is managing the boss, managing the board, managing the owner, managing upwards. And exactly what you discussed also, and your favorite topic here coming in on, how do you put parameters around yourself to protect yourself, your schedule, so that you're not burning out? This is the number one challenge that they have, and the breakthroughs therefore are when we are able to help each other there to put these frameworks around yourself so you can live a better life. And that is something that is difficult. But when you're in a group with like-minded who have similar responsibilities, you can learn how can you have these conversations with your boss, without them thinking that you don't want to do your job. But it's about having, again, just being honest and open and having these conversations with the people around you. People might not understand that when they send an invite for a meeting that it's 2 a.m. your local time. It's about then taking a note of that and calling a meeting and just educate the people around you. And what I've seen also best practice here is that some companies will say, okay, Monday or Friday, we don't have any meetings across time zones. The Monday and Friday is your focus time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you say these are, and you color code perhaps in the calendars the times when you can actually invite people in different time zones. So there's ways to manage this. But if you are a senior executive in one office, for example, how do you have these conversations with your boss or your HR? And that's where we come in, and we can help everyone to have these conversations.
Yeah, it's such a valuable, like we talked about earlier. You know, who do you go to for support? I think that's so often the first, potential stumbling block, is you just don't know where to go. So I mean, having an organization like this and a place where that safety is created from the start, and when you go into it that's the role is going to be to create that space and to have those conversations that you otherwise wouldn't be able to have. That's incredible. Well, Nick, this has really been a pleasure. I could go on and on. There's so much overlap here in your experience and my passion, but I genuinely appreciate it. This has been real enjoyable for me, and I appreciate your time and your vulnerability.
Yeah, thank you so much, Taylor. It's been great having this conversation with you as well.